Before we get into this story, I want to ask you to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you're interested in these real accounts from the field. It really helps the channel grow and lets me bring you more of these stories. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I always love hearing from you all around the world. Now, let's get into what happened in the summer of 1989. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I was a smoke jumper for the United States Forest Service for 12 years before the events I'm about to tell you made me question everything I thought I understood about fire, time, and the thin line between the two. If you don't know what a smoke jumper is, let me explain. We're wildland firefighters who parachute into remote areas to fight fires that ground crews can't reach. It's dangerous work, the kind that requires you to be part firefighter, part paratrooper, and part survivalist. We jump out of planes into some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, carrying 100 pounds of gear, landing in forests that are actively burning, and then we fight fire for days or sometimes weeks until the blaze is contained. I started smoke jumping in 1977 right out of college, one of the first women to make it through the brutal training program in Missoula, Montana. Back then, it was even more of a boys' club than it is now, and I had to prove myself twice as hard to earn half the respect. But I loved it. The adrenaline, the challenge, the raw confrontation with nature at its most powerful. There's nothing else like it. By 1989, I was a crew boss, leading a team of 8 jumpers out of the McCall Smokejumper base in Idaho. We were good, one of the best crews in the service, with a track record of successful jumps and contained fires that spoke for itself. We'd fought fires in California, Oregon, Montana, and all over Idaho. I thought I'd seen everything fire could throw at us. I was wrong. It started on August 17th, 1989. One of those scorching days where the air itself feels like it's about to combust. We'd been on standby all week, watching weather patterns and fire reports, knowing something big was coming. The conditions were perfect for a catastrophic fire. Temperatures in the high 90s, humidity in the single digits, and winds gusting up to 30 miles per hour. The call came at 2 p.m. Fire reported in the Bitterroot National Forest, remote backcountry area about 60 miles northeast of McCall. Lightning strike from the previous night's thunderstorm had ignited a stand of lodgepole pine, and with the wind and dry conditions it was spreading fast. Ground crews couldn't get anywhere near it. The access roads were nearly non-existent, and the terrain was too rough for vehicles. We were the only option. I assembled my crew, Jake Morrison, my second in command, a big guy from Montana who'd been jumping almost as long as I had, Carlos Reyes, our best spotter with an uncanny ability to read wind patterns, Amy Chen, the youngest on our team but sharp as hell and fearless, Marcus Webb, Tommy Rodriguez, Dana White, and Chris Anderson rounded out the team. 8 of us total, counting me. We loaded into the DC-3 aircraft that would take us to the fire. The plane was old, a workhorse from the 50s, but reliable. I'd made hundreds of jumps from that plane, and I knew every rattle and hum of its engines. As we flew toward the fire, I could see the smoke column rising from miles away. It was massive, a towering pillar of gray and black that punched into the atmosphere like a fist. The base of the column glowed orange, and even from our altitude, I could see the fire spreading through the forest like a living thing. "Jesus," Jake muttered, looking out the window. "That's a big one." "We've seen bigger," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. This fire looked different somehow. The smoke column was too vertical, too organized. Most fires create chaotic smoke patterns that twist and spiral with the wind. This one rose straight up like it was being pulled. Our spotter, Carlos, moved to the jump door and started assessing conditions: wind speed, direction, terrain, potential landing zones. This was the most critical part of the operation. If Carlos miscalculated, we could land in the fire itself or hit trees and get injured before we even started fighting. "LZ looks good," Carlos called out over the engine noise. "Wind is steady from the northwest at about 15 knots, aiming for that clearing about half a mile from the fire's leading edge. It's going to be a tight approach, but we can make it." I nodded and started gearing up. Each of us wore a Kevlar jumpsuit helmet with face mask and a reserve parachute in addition to our main chute. We carried personal gear bags that would be dropped separately, containing our tools, food, water, and camping equipment for what could be a week-long deployment. "Listen up," I called to the crew. "This is a standard jump and attack. We hit the ground, establish a staging area, and start cutting fire break. The fire is moving northeast, so we're going to try to flank it from the west and contain it before it reaches that ridge. By the book, no heroics. Everyone goes home." They nodded, faces serious. We'd all had friends who died fighting fires. It was an occupational hazard we accepted, but we never took lightly. I was first out, as crew boss. I moved to the door, felt the blast of wind and heat from outside, checked my static line one last time, and then stepped into nothing. The jump is always the best part. For those first few seconds, you're in free fall, the ground rushing up at you, the wind screaming past your helmet. Then the static line deploys your chute, and suddenly you're floating, swaying gently under the canopy, the world spread out below you in terrifying beauty. I looked down and saw the fire. From up here, it looked like a living organism, a sprawling mass of orange and red that consumed everything in its path. I could hear it, too, a low roar like a freight train, punctuated by the crack and crash of falling trees. I steered toward the clearing Carlos had identified, watching as the rest of my crew deployed behind me. 8 parachutes in the sky, white against the smoke-darkened air. I hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact, then quickly collapsed my chute before the wind could drag me. I was in a small meadow, maybe 2 acres of grass and wildflowers, surrounded by dense forest. The air was thick with smoke, and the temperature was already uncomfortable, even though the fire was still half a mile away. One by one, my crew landed. Everyone made it down safely, no injuries, no problems. Our gear bags landed a few minutes later, and we quickly assembled our equipment. Pulaskis, the combination axe hose that are the primary tool of wildland firefighters. Chainsaws for the bigger trees. Shovels, fire shelters in case we got caught in a burnover, radios, and water. "Okay," I said, gathering everyone. "Jake, you take Marcus and Tommy. Start cutting line to the west. Amy, you're with me and Carlos. We'll scout the fire's head and figure out its behavior. Dana and Chris establish base camp here and keep in radio contact. We regroup at 1800 hours." We split up, and I led Amy and Carlos toward the fire. The smoke got thicker as we moved through the forest, the air hot enough to make breathing difficult even through our face masks. The sound of the fire grew louder, a constant roar that you could feel in your chest. We pushed through a thicket of young pines, and suddenly we were at the fire's edge. I'd seen hundreds of fires in my career, but I still wasn't prepared for the raw power of it. Flames 30 feet high consuming trees in seconds, the heat so intense it created its own wind, sucking air toward it like a vacuum. But something was wrong. I stood there watching the fire, and it took me a moment to realize what I was seeing. The fire was spreading, yes, but it wasn't spreading the way fire should spread. It was moving backwards. "Sarah," Carlos said, his voice uncertain, "am I seeing this right?" I didn't answer immediately because I was trying to make sense of it myself. Fire spreads by preheating the fuel ahead of it, drying out trees and brush until they're ready to ignite. It moves in the direction the wind is blowing, following the path of least resistance. This fire was doing the opposite. Where the flames touched already burned ground, the ash was reconstituting. I watched a fallen log that had been reduced to charcoal suddenly regain its structure. The black surface lightening to brown, bark reappearing. It was like watching a film played in reverse, except this was happening in real time right in front of us. "That's not possible," Amy said, and I could hear the fear in her voice. The flames weren't reaching out to unburned trees. They were retreating from them, pulling back toward the fire's origin point. But at the same time, the fire was still spreading in the traditional direction. It was doing both simultaneously, burning forward and backward at the same time. I keyed my radio. "Jake, what's your position?" "We're about a quarter-mile west of the LZ, starting our cut. Why?" "What does the fire behavior look like from your position?" There was a pause. "That's the weird thing, boss. The burn pattern doesn't make sense. We're finding areas that should be freshly burned based on the fire's progression, but they look like they burned weeks ago, and other areas that should be old burns look fresh." I looked at Carlos and Amy. They were both staring at the impossible fire, and I could see the same confusion and fear on their faces that I felt. "Carlos, check your weather kit. Wind direction, temperature, humidity. I need to know if there's something atmospheric causing this." He pulled out his handheld weather station and started taking readings. After a minute, he shook his head. "Everything's normal. Well, normal for a fire this size. Wind is consistent from the northwest. Temperature is high, humidity is low. Nothing that would explain what we're seeing." I tried to think logically. Forest fires can create strange effects. Fire whirls that spin like tornadoes. Spot fires that jump miles ahead of the main blaze. Crown fires that race through treetops faster than a person can run. But I'd never heard of a fire that burned in reverse. "We need to get closer to the origin point," I said. "Find out where this thing started and see if that explains the behavior." "Sarah, I don't think that's a good idea," Amy said. "If the fire is behaving this unpredictably, getting closer seems— I know it's dangerous, but we can't fight this thing if we don't understand it. And right now, I have no idea what we're dealing with." We moved parallel to the fire line, using the already burned areas as a safety zone. If the fire suddenly changed direction, we could step into the burn and be protected by the lack of fuel. It was standard procedure, except nothing about this fire was standard. As we walked, I noticed something else strange. The sound of the fire was wrong. Fire makes a lot of noise. The roar of flames, the crack of exploding sap in trees, the crash of falling timber. This fire made all those sounds, but played backward. I heard trees uncrashing, standing back up with a groan of wood. I heard the roar of flames, but it sounded like inhalation instead of exhalation, like the fire was breathing in. "Do you guys hear that?" I asked. "Yeah," Carlos said. "It's like reverse audio, like someone's playing the fire backwards." We'd been walking for about 20 minutes when my radio crackled with a voice I didn't recognize. "Station 12, this is Sector Chief Morrison. Do you copy?" I stopped. Station 12 wasn't one of our call signs, and Morrison was Jake's last name, but that wasn't Jake's voice. It was older, rougher, and the radio quality sounded wrong, full of static and a strange echoing quality. "This is Crew Boss Martinez," I responded. "Who is this?" "Martinez, is that you, Sarah?" "Thank God. We need reinforcements at the forward line. The fire jumped our break and we're falling back. Where's your crew?" I looked at Carlos and Amy. They'd heard it too, their expressions confused. "Identify yourself. What station are you with?" "Station 12, out of Wallace, Idaho. Crew boss is Edward Morrison. We've been fighting this thing for 3 days, and it's not slowing down. How far out are you?" "Wallace, Idaho." Station 12. Something about those names tickled my memory, but I couldn't place it. "Sir, We're smoke jumpers out of McCall, just arrived on scene. There is no Station 12 in Wallace anymore. That station closed down decades ago." There was a long pause, filled with static. Then, "What year is it?" The question sent a chill down my spine. "It's 1989, August 17th, 1989. Another long pause. When the voice came back, it sounded shaken. "That's not possible. It's 1910, August 20th, 1910. We're fighting the big blow-up, the fire that started 3 days ago." The big blow-up. Suddenly I knew exactly what he was talking about. The Great Fire of 1910, also called the Big Blow-up or the Big Burn, was the largest wildfire in United States history. It burned 3 million acres across Idaho, Montana, and Washington in just 2 days, August 20th to 21st, 1910. 78 firefighters died, most of them in a single afternoon when the fire exploded in a massive firestorm. The fire burned so hot it created its own weather, spawning fire tornadoes and fireballs that traveled miles ahead of the main blaze. The fire fundamentally changed how America fought wildfires. It led to the expansion of the Forest Service, the development of modern firefighting techniques, and shaped fire policy for the next century. Every smoke jumper knew the story of the big blow-up. It was part of our history, our tradition, our understanding of what fire could do at its worst. But that fire happened 79 years ago. The man on the radio couldn't be fighting it. Unless, "Carlos," I said quietly, "where did this fire start? What's the origin point?" He checked his map, comparing it with the GPS coordinates we'd been given. His face went pale. "Sarah, according to the incident report, the lightning strike that started this fire hit near a place called Setzer Creek. That's the same area where the 1910 fire started. The exact same spot." I felt my hands start to shake. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of radio interference, a prank, something explainable. I keyed the radio again. "Edward Morrison, if you can hear me, what's your exact location?" "We're at Setzer Creek, trying to hold the line. But the wind shifted, and the fire's coming at us from all directions. We're about to be surrounded. Listen to me very carefully. You need to fall back. Get your crew to a safety zone. The fire you're fighting is going to explode in the next few hours. Dozens of men are going to die if they don't get to safety." "How do you know that?" "Because I know the history. The big blow-up killed 78 firefighters on August 20th and 21st, 1910. You're fighting that fire right now. You need to save your men." There was no response, just static. "Edward, do you copy?" Nothing. I tried several more times, but the channel was dead. Whatever connection we'd made across 79 years of time had been severed. "That was real, wasn't it?" Amy said. "We just talked to someone from 1910. "I don't know," I said, though I was starting to believe it was. "But we need to get to Setzer Creek. We need to find the origin point of this fire." We changed direction, heading northwest toward where the map indicated Setzer Creek should be. The fire was more intense here, the flames higher and hotter, but we stayed in the burned areas using the blackened safety zones to move forward. As we walked, I started noticing other anomalies. Tools on the ground that looked old, ancient even. A Pulaski with a wooden handle so weathered it should have rotted away decades ago. A canteen with USFS stamped on it, in a style the Forest Service hadn't used since the 1930s. Boot prints in ash that were both fresh and ancient simultaneously. We were walking through layers of time. After an hour of hard hiking, we reached Setzer Creek. The creek itself was almost dry, just a trickle of water through a rocky bed. But the area around it was a nightmare of fire activity. Flames towered 40 feet high, creating convection currents so strong they spawned small tornadoes of fire. The heat was unbearable, even at a distance, and in the center of it all, I saw something impossible. There was a spot, maybe 20 feet in diameter, where the fire wasn't just burning. It was burning in all directions at once. Flames spread outward from a central point, but also inward toward it. The fire was both expanding and contracting simultaneously, and in that central point, there was a core of flame that wasn't orange or red, but a strange purple-blue, like the hottest part of a gas flame. "That's not a natural fire," Carlos said. He was right. That blue flame was burning at temperatures that shouldn't be possible in a wildfire. Wildfire typically burns at around 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. That blue flame had to be at least 3,000 degrees, hot enough to melt rock. As we watched, I saw something move in the flames. Figures, human-shaped, walking through the fire like it wasn't there. They wore old-style firefighting gear, the kind from the early 1900s, wool pants, canvas shirts, wide-brimmed hats. They carried Pulaskis and shovels and worked the fire line with desperate intensity. "Do you see them?" I asked. "The 1910 crew," Amy whispered. "They're still here, still fighting." We watched for several minutes as the ghostly firefighters worked. They seemed unaware of us, focused entirely on their impossible task of containing a fire that had already been burning for 79 years. Then one of them looked up. He was a big man, probably in his 40s, with a thick mustache and soot-stained face. He saw us, and his eyes widened in surprise. He said something to the men around him, and they all stopped working and turned to look at us. The big man started walking toward us, moving through the flames without being burned. As he got closer, I could see him more clearly. He was solid, real, not a ghost or a hallucination. And I recognized him from the voice. Edward Morrison. He stopped at the edge of the blue flame, just a few feet away from us. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his face, the desperation. "You're real," he said. "You're actually from the future." "Yes," I said. 1989, 79 years after your fire started." He looked at the men behind him, then back at us. "We've been fighting this fire for 3 days, 3 days that have lasted 79 years. We can't stop it. We can't contain it, and we can't leave. Why not? Because when we try, we end up right back here at Setzer Creek on August 20th, 1910. The fire has us trapped in a loop. We fight, we fall back, we try to escape, and then we're back at the beginning, starting over." My mind raced. A time loop centered on the fire's origin point. That would explain the reverse burning, the temporal anomalies, everything. "How many times have you repeated?" I asked. Edward laughed bitterly. "I've lost count, hundreds, maybe thousands. We remember it all, every loop, every attempt to escape. Do you know what that's like? Fighting the same fire over and over, watching the same men die over and over, and never being able to stop it. The history books say 78 firefighters died in the big blow-up. They did, and they keep dying, every loop. Some of us survive each time, but the same 78 always die. And then the loop resets, and we do it all again." I felt sick. This wasn't just a temporal anomaly, it was hell. An eternal punishment for men who'd done nothing wrong except try to fight a fire. "There has to be a way to break the loop," I said. "Some way to stop the fire and free you." Edward shook his head. "We've tried everything. We've let the fire burn. We've fought it with everything we have. We've sacrificed ourselves trying to reach the core. Nothing works. The fire just resets and starts over. What if someone from outside the loop tried? Someone from a different time?" He looked at me with something that might have been hope. "You think you can stop it?" "I don't know." but I have to try. Behind me, I heard voices. I turned and saw Jake and the rest of my crew approaching. They'd followed our radio signals and found us. "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" Jake asked, staring at the blue flame and the men inside it. "Who are they?" "The 1910 crew," I said. "They've been trapped here for 79 years, fighting the same fire over and over." Jake's face went through several expressions: disbelief, shock, and finally grim acceptance. He'd been a smoke jumper long enough to know that fire could do strange things. Maybe even this. "So, what do we do?" he asked. I looked at the blue flame, at Edward Morrison and his trapped crew, at my own team gathered around me. We'd come here to fight a fire. We just hadn't expected the fire to be fighting across time itself. "We do our job," I said. "We fight the fire, and we find a way to break the loop." Edward nodded slowly. "If you're going to try, you need to understand what you're dealing with. That blue flame at the center, that's where it all started. Not just this fire, but something older. Something that was here before the forest, before the trees, before anything. The 1910 fire tapped into it somehow, and now it's feeding on time itself." "Feeding on time?" "The fire burns forward and backward simultaneously because it's consuming past and future fuel. It's not just a wildfire anymore. It's a temporal event, and we're caught in its gravity. Then we need to starve it," I said. "Cut it off from fuel across all timelines. How do you starve a fire that exists in multiple times at once?" That was the question. And as I looked at the blue flame, at the impossible fire that had been burning for 79 years, I realized I had no idea how to answer it. But I was going to have to figure it out. Because if I didn't, my crew and I would end up just like Edward Morrison and his men, trapped in an endless loop, fighting a fire that could never be extinguished. The sun was setting now, casting the forest in shades of orange and red that looked disturbingly like flames. We had maybe an hour of daylight left. "We make camp," I said. "Tonight we plan. Tomorrow we fight." "Tomorrow," Edward said quietly. "It will be August 21st, 1910, the day of the blow-up, the day the fire kills 78 men, in both timelines." I felt cold despite the heat of the fire. Tomorrow was going to be bad. In 1910, tomorrow was the day the fire exploded, driven by hurricane-force winds and consumed everything in its path. If the temporal loop was maintaining that pattern, tomorrow would bring the same catastrophic conditions. We had one night to figure out how to stop a fire that was burning through time itself. One night to save 2 crews separated by 79 years. One night before the blow-up. We set up camp in a clearing about a quarter-mile from the blue flame, far enough to be safe from the immediate fire but close enough to monitor it. The 1910 crew maintained their own camp inside the temporal loop, and I could see their campfires flickering through the flames, looking like reflections in a mirror. As darkness fell, the true strangeness of the fire became apparent. Normal wildfires create their own light show at night, but this was different. The blue flame at the center pulsed like a heartbeat, and with each pulse I could see ripples spreading through time. For a moment, the forest around us would shift, looking older or younger, the trees changing height and thickness, and then snap back to 1989. My crew sat around our fire, and I could see the fear and confusion in their faces. These were experienced firefighters, people who'd faced down infernos and lived, but this was beyond anything in our training. "All right," I said, pulling out my map and notes. "Let's approach this scientifically. What do we know for certain?" Jake spoke first. "The fire started at Setzer Creek, same location in both 1910 and 1989. Lightning strike in both cases. The 1910 fire created some kind of temporal loop, Carlos added. The crew has been trapped fighting the same fire for 79 years. And the fire burns in both directions simultaneously, Amy said. Forward in our time and backward toward the origin point. I nodded. Edward Morrison said the blue flame is the key. Something old, something that existed before the forest. The 1910 fire somehow tapped into it. What could create a temporal anomaly like this? Dana asked. This is like science fiction. Maybe not, Marcus said. He was our quietest crew member, but he had a degree in geology. I've read about theories of temporal hotspots, places where the fabric of space-time is thin or unstable, usually associated with unusual geological features or extreme energy events. What kind of geological features? Fault lines, volcanic activity, areas with unusual mineral deposits. Certain crystals and metals can have strange properties under extreme conditions. I thought about this. So, if there's something in the ground at Setzer Creek, something with unusual properties, and then a massive wildfire creates extreme heat and energy, it could punch through to other times, Marcus finished. Like how heat can change the phase of matter. Extreme energy might change the phase of time itself. It was a theory, anyway, and it was more than we'd had before. Okay, I said. Tomorrow morning, we need to get to the exact origin point, the spot where the lightning struck in 1910. If there's something there, some kind of source creating the anomaly, maybe we can neutralize it. How? Jake asked. We can't exactly cool down a temporal hotspot with water or fire retardant. I don't know yet, but we have to try. I decided to take first watch, telling the crew to get what sleep they could. As they settled in, I walked to the edge of our camp, looking toward the blue flame. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like staring into the heart of something that shouldn't exist. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Edward Morrison walking through the fire toward me. He moved through the flames like they were mist, unburned, and when he stepped out of the temporal loop into our time, he solidified further, becoming more real. You can leave the loop? I asked. For short periods. The farther I get from the blue flame, the more I feel the pull to return. It's like gravity. Eventually it drags me back. He looked around at our camp, at the modern equipment and technology. 79 years. The world must have changed a lot. You have no idea. Did we win? He asked quietly. The war in Europe. Did we win? I realized he was talking about World War I, which wouldn't end until November 1918. Yes, we won, but there was another war after that, and others. He nodded sadly. There always is. He sat down on a log near the fire. Tell me about the Forest Service. Did it survive? After we die, does it continue? It more than survived. The big blow-up changed everything. It led to massive expansion of the Forest Service, new policies, better equipment. In a way, you and your men created modern wildland firefighting. At the cost of 78 lives, every loop, over and over. That's why we're going to stop it. Free you. He looked at me with tired eyes. I've had 79 years to think about this, Sarah. You know what I believe? The fire doesn't want to be stopped. It's alive in a way fire shouldn't be. It's conscious, and it's hungry. Fire isn't conscious. It's a chemical reaction. Normal fire, yes. But this? He gestured toward the blue flame. This is something else. I've watched it, studied it, tried to understand it. It learns, it adapts. Every loop, it changes slightly, testing different patterns, different behaviors. And I think it's using us, our memories, our experiences, our time. It's feeding on them. A chill ran through me. If that's true, then every person who gets caught in the loop makes it stronger. Yes. And if you and your crew get trapped tomorrow, it will have access to 79 more years of knowledge and experience. It will learn about your time, your technology, your world. I stood up, pacing. Then we can't fail. We can't get caught in the loop. That's what I told myself. On August 20th, 1910, I thought I was prepared. I thought I understood fire. I was wrong. I wanted to ask him more, but he suddenly stiffened, looking towards the blue flame. I have to go back. The pull is getting too strong. Wait, one more question. In all the loops, all the attempts to stop this, did you ever find anyone else trapped here? Anyone from other times? He paused, then nodded slowly. Once. About 200 loops ago, I think. We found a man at Setzer Creek. He was wearing strange clothes, materials I didn't recognize. He spoke English, but with an accent I couldn't place. He said he was from 2047. My blood ran cold. What happened to him? The fire took him, pulled him into the blue flame. We never saw him again. Edward started walking back toward the temporal loop. Be careful tomorrow, Sarah. The fire knows you're here, and I think it wants you. He disappeared into the flames, and I was left alone with that terrifying thought. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours reviewing our maps, trying to form a plan, and watching the blue flame pulse in the darkness. As dawn approached, I noticed something strange. The fire's reverse burning was accelerating. Areas that had been slowly reconstituting were now reforming at visible speed. Ash became wood, became living trees in minutes. It's getting ready, Carlos said, appearing beside me. He hadn't slept either. The blow-up, it's building toward the same event that happened in 1910. How long do you think we have? Based on the historical records, the worst of the 1910 fire happened in the afternoon. Hurricane-force winds, fire tornadoes, temperatures hot enough to melt metal. If we're going to do something, we need to do it this morning. I woke the crew and explained the plan. We would approach the origin point, try to identify the source of the temporal anomaly, and neutralize it if possible. It was vague because I honestly didn't know what we'd find or what we'd need to do. We geared up with extra water, fire shelters, and every tool we had. Marcus brought his geology kit, hoping to analyze whatever we found. We also brought climbing rope, thinking we might need to rappel into Setzer Creek's ravine. As we approached the blue flame, I saw Edward and his crew preparing as well. They were going to attempt what they'd attempted hundreds of times before, trying to control the fire before the blow-up. Ready? I asked my team. They nodded, faces set with determination. We entered the temporal loop. The sensation was immediate and disorienting. Time felt thick, like moving through water. I could see multiple versions of the same moment overlapping. My crew was walking forward, but I could also see them walking backward, see them in positions they'd occupy minutes from now, see ghost images of hundreds of previous attempts by Edward's crew. Sound became layered. I heard the fires roar in both directions, heard voices from multiple timelines, heard the hammer of my own heartbeat echoing across decades. We pushed toward the center, toward the blue flame. The heat should have been unbearable, but it wasn't. Inside the loop, the temperature was constant, unchanging, as if the fire was burning outside of normal thermodynamics. Edward met us halfway. Follow me. I'll show you the exact spot. We descended into the Setzer Creek ravine. The creek bed was dry now, the water long since evaporated or diverted by the fire. At the bottom, Edward led us to a specific point where the ravine narrowed and the rock faces pressed close together. Here, he said. This is where the lightning struck in 1910. This is ground zero. I knelt down, examining the rock. It was scorched black, but there was something underneath the char. I scraped away the burned material and found stone that glowed faintly with that same blue-purple light as the flame. "Marcus, come look at this." He came over with his geology kit and examined the stone. His eyes widened. "Sarah, this isn't natural. I mean, the stone is natural basalt, but it's been altered. The crystalline structure is wrong, organized in patterns that don't occur in nature. What could do that?" "I don't know. Extreme pressure, extreme heat, or—" He pulled out a Geiger counter from his kit and held it near the stone. The device immediately started clicking rapidly. "Radiation, low level, but it's there. Is it dangerous?" "Not immediately, but over time, yes. And if this has been radioactive since 1910, it's been pumping radiation into the environment for 79 years, I finished. "Not just radiation," Marcus said, pulling out more instruments. "The magnetic field here is all wrong. It's fluctuating rapidly, and the pattern looks almost organized, like a signal." "A signal to what?" Before he could answer, the ground shook. Not an earthquake, but something else. A pulse of energy that radiated from the glowing stone. Edward grabbed my arm. "It's starting. The blow-up. It's the same every loop. First the pulse, then the wind, then the fire explodes." As if on cue, I felt wind starting to pick up. It came from all directions at once, drawn towards the blue flame like it was being sucked into a vortex. "We need to move," Jake shouted. "Get to high ground." But Edward shook his head. "There is no high ground in the loop. Everywhere is the center. Everywhere is the fire." The wind intensified, and I heard the roar of the fire increasing. Through the flames, I could see Edward's crew running, taking positions they'd taken hundreds of times before, preparing for the onslaught they knew was coming. "Sarah," Amy called out, "look at the stone." I turned back to the glowing basalt. It was pulsing faster now, and with each pulse, the blue-purple light grew brighter. Cracks were forming in the stone, spreading outward in geometric patterns that looked deliberate. "It's a capacitor," Marcus said with sudden realization. "The stone is storing energy. The 1910 lightning strike charged it with massive electrical energy, and combined with whatever unusual properties this stone has, it created a temporal feedback loop. Every year, on August 20th, it releases that energy, recreating the same fire, the same conditions, the same event. Can we discharge it, ground it somehow? Maybe, but we'd need to create a path for the energy to flow, something that could handle the massive discharge without—" The stone cracked wide open. Blue-purple energy poured out like liquid light, flowing up and out, feeding the flame above. The wind became a hurricane, and the temperature spiked. I saw trees exploding into flame, saw the fire creating its own weather system, spawning fire tornadoes that spun up from the forest floor. The blow-up had begun. "Shelters!" I screamed. "Deploy fire shelters now!" Fire shelters are last resort survival tools. You pull them out, wrap yourself in the aluminum-coated fabric, and pray the fire passes over you without cooking you alive inside. They're designed to withstand temperatures up to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit for about a minute. My crew scrambled to deploy their shelters, but before I could reach mine, I saw something that made me freeze. Through the wall of flame, I saw more figures. Not Edward's 1910 crew. Different people, wearing different gear. Some in modern firefighting equipment even more advanced than ours. Some in clothes I didn't recognize. Some wearing what looked like environmental suits from science fiction. Firefighters from different times, all trapped in the same loop. "Sarah!" Jake grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the shelter. "We have to move." But I couldn't stop staring, because among those figures I saw someone I recognized. She was wearing a Smokejumper uniform with patches I didn't recognize, carrying equipment that looked like it came from decades in the future. And her face, it was my face. Older, weathered, with gray hair and scars I didn't have yet, but unmistakably me. She saw me too. Our eyes met across the fire and time, and I saw recognition and terrible sadness in her expression. She mouthed 3 words, "Don't come back." Then the fire wall swept between us, and she was gone. The next minutes were chaos. We got into our shelters as the fire roared over us. I could feel the heat through the aluminum, feel the shelter trying to tear away in the wind. I heard my crew calling to each other. Heard Edward's men screaming as the same death that had taken them in 1910 took them again. And I heard something else. A voice ancient and wrong, speaking in the roar of the flames. It said one word over and over, "Stay." The fire passed, the wind died, the temperature dropped. I emerged from my shelter, shaking, ears ringing. The forest around me was transformed. Half of it was freshly burned, black and smoking. The other half was lush and green, untouched, looking like it had never seen fire. My crew emerged one by one. Everyone had survived. We counted off, checking for injuries. Some burns, some smoke inhalation, but we were alive. Edward and his crew were there too, already starting to fight the fire again, beginning the same loop they'd been caught in for 79 years. But now I understood what was happening. The stone at Setzer Creek was creating the loop, feeding it energy. But it wasn't just random. It was collecting firefighters across time, trapping anyone who came to fight this fire. And eventually it would trap me too. I'd seen my future self. I knew that at some point I would come back here, would get caught in the loop, and would spend years or decades trying to escape. Unless I could stop it now. "Marcus," I said, "that stone. You said it's like a capacitor. What if we overload it, force it to discharge all its energy at once instead of in a loop? How would we do that?" "Lightning," I said. "It was charged by lightning. Maybe we can trigger another strike, force it to release everything in one massive discharge." "That might collapse the entire temporal loop," Carlos said. "It might free everyone, or it might kill everyone. We don't know." I looked at Edward, who'd walked over to us. "What do you think?" He looked at his crew, at the men who'd been fighting and dying for 79 years. "We've been dead since 1910. If there's a chance to end this, to finally rest, I'll take it. Even if it means dying for real? Sarah, we've died thousands of times already. At least this way it might mean something." I made my decision. We need to trigger a lightning strike at the exact point where the stone is cracked open. "Carlos, can you rig up something that would attract lightning?" "Maybe. If I take our radio equipment, the metal tools, build a makeshift lightning rod, but we'd need a storm and the sky is clear." "No, it isn't," Amy said, pointing up. "Look." Dark clouds were forming overhead, appearing out of nowhere. The fire's heat was creating convection currents, drawing in moisture, building toward a thunderstorm. It was the same weather pattern that had produced the 1910 lightning strike. The loop was repeating. In hours, maybe minutes, lightning would strike Setzer Creek again, recharging the stone, resetting everything, unless we controlled where that lightning hit. "We have maybe an hour," I said. "Let's move." We worked frantically, building a lightning rod from everything metal we had. Radio equipment, tools, even the aluminum from our fire shelters. We positioned it directly over the cracked stone, creating a path for the lightning to follow. The storm built overhead, dark and angry. Thunder rumbled and I could see lightning flickering between the clouds. "Everyone back," I shouted. "Get to minimum safe distance." My crew retreated, but Edward and his men stayed close. "We need to be here," Edward said. "When the loop collapses, we need to be at the origin point, or we might be scattered across time. The first lightning bolt struck a tree half a mile away. The second hit closer. The storm was intensifying, drawn by the fire and the heat and the strange energy radiating from the stone. "It's coming," Carlos said. I counted the seconds between lightning and thunder. The storm was almost directly overhead. Then I saw her again, my future self, standing on the opposite side of the ravine. She was watching me, and I could see tears on her face. She raised her hand in a salute, and I understood. She was me from a timeline where I failed, where I got trapped in the loop. She'd been fighting this fire for who knows how many years, watching herself try again and again to break free. But this time, this version of me, I might succeed. And if I did, she would cease to exist. The loop that created her would collapse. I returned the salute, honoring the woman I might have become, acknowledging her sacrifice. Lightning struck our rod. The world exploded in blue-purple light. I felt energy pouring through everything, felt time itself rippling and buckling. I saw all the loops simultaneously, hundreds or thousands of attempts to fight this fire, all collapsing into a single moment. I saw the 1910 crew in their final moments, saw Edward Morrison looking peaceful as he faded. I saw firefighters from other times, from years and decades and centuries I couldn't identify, all released from the temporal trap. And I saw my future self smile as she dissolved into light. The stone shattered completely, releasing 79 years of stored energy in one massive pulse. Then darkness. I woke up to rain. Cool, blessed rain falling on my face. I opened my eyes and saw clear sky. No smoke, no fire. I sat up slowly, every muscle aching. My crew was around me, all unconscious but breathing. The Setzer Creek ravine looked different. The rock was normal stone, no blue glow, no cracks. The forest around us was a mix of burned and unburned, but it looked natural, not the impossible overlay of multiple times. "Sarah," Jake groaned, sitting up. "What happened?" "I think we broke the loop." One by one, the crew woke up. We were all there, all alive, all free. But Edward and his crew were gone. The 1910 firefighters who'd been trapped for 79 years had finally been released. I hoped they'd found peace. We hiked back to our landing zone, calling for evacuation. The fire was out, extinguished by the rain that had followed the lightning strike. Our job was done. As we waited for the helicopter, I found something in my pocket that hadn't been there before. A photograph, old and faded, showing firefighters from 1910. In the back row, I could just barely make out a woman who looked like me. I must have been there somehow, in one of the loops. And when the timelines collapsed, this photograph remained as the only evidence. I kept it, a reminder of what we'd faced, what we'd overcome. But as the helicopter lifted us out of the forest, I looked back at Setzer Creek one more time. And I swear I saw smoke rising from the ravine. Just a wisp, hardly visible. Blue-purple smoke. The fire might be out, but I had a terrible feeling it wasn't over. 3 weeks after Setzer Creek, I should have been back to normal. The official report called it a successful suppression action. Lightning caused wildfire, contained and extinguished within 24 hours, 0 casualties. The incident was filed, closed, and forgotten by everyone except those who were there. But I couldn't forget the blue-purple smoke I'd seen rising from the ravine as we evacuated. I tried, God knows I tried. I went back to regular jump rotations, fought fires in California and Oregon, did everything I could to convince myself it was over. The temporal loop was broken. Edward Morrison and his crew were freed. The anomaly was resolved. So why did I keep dreaming about that photograph? the one showing firefighters from 1910 with a woman in the back who looked like me. Every night, I'd see her face, see my face, and I'd wake up knowing something was still wrong. Finally, in mid-September, I couldn't take it anymore. I requested a week of personal leave and drove back to Idaho. I told myself I just needed closure, needed to see the site one more time and confirm it was truly dead. I was lying to myself. The forest around Setzer Creek looked different in daylight without the fire. The burned areas were beginning to recover, new growth sprouting through the ash. It should have been peaceful, but I felt a tightness in my chest as I hiked toward the ravine. When I reached the spot where the stone had been, I found it had been excavated. Someone had dug out the entire area, removing the basalt and several feet of surrounding earth. Yellow tape marked it as a geological survey site. That shouldn't have surprised me. Marcus had mentioned the unusual properties of the stone. Of course, scientists would want to study it. But something about the excavation bothered me. It was too precise, too surgical, and there were no Forest Service markers, no BLM tags, nothing to indicate who had authorized this work. I was examining the dig site when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find an older woman, maybe 60, wearing a combination of hiking gear and what looked like specialized scientific equipment. "Sarah Martinez," she said. It wasn't a question. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. My name is Dr. Patricia Chen. I'm a temporal physicist from Berkeley, and I've been waiting for you to come back here." Temporal physicist. The words sent a chill through me. "There's no such thing as temporal physics," I said. She smiled sadly. There wasn't, until 1989, when a smokejumper crew encountered a temporal loop at Setzer Creek and managed to collapse it. After that event, the government quietly established a research division to study temporal anomalies. I'm part of that division. "How do you know about what happened here?" "Because we've been monitoring this site since 1910. We have records going back over a century documenting the temporal loop, the trapped firefighters, the failed attempts to break it, and we have records from the future documenting what happens next." My mouth went dry. "What happens next?" "The stone you destroyed was a natural temporal anchor. It was preventing something much worse from manifesting. By shattering it, you didn't end the anomaly. You freed it." She led me to a mobile laboratory set up in a clearing nearby. Inside were instruments I didn't recognize, screens showing data that looked like nothing I'd seen in any science class. "Let me show you something," Dr. Chen said, pulling up a graph. "This is the temporal field strength at Setzer Creek over the past century. See this spike in 1910? That's when the original fire created the loop. And see how it stayed constant for 79 years? That's the stone acting as a stabilizing force, containing the energy in a controlled loop. And this?" I pointed to the sharp drop at the end of August 1989. "That's when you broke the stone. The field strength dropped to 0. For about 3 weeks. She pulled up a more recent graph. The line had started climbing again. Slowly at first, then accelerating. "It's rebuilding," she said quietly. "Without the stone to contain it, the temporal energy is spreading. In 3 weeks, it's already reached 10 times the area it covered before." Spreading to where? Everywhere the 1910 fire burned. All 3 million acres. And it's accelerating. At the current rate, by this time next year, the entire Pacific Northwest will be inside a temporal anomaly zone. I felt sick. What does that mean for the people living there? We don't know exactly. The only data we have comes from the contained loop at Setzer Creek, but we can extrapolate. Time dilation, temporal bleeding between past and future, possible formation of new loops. Millions of people could get trapped experiencing moments over and over, or find themselves slipping between different eras. How do we stop it? That's why I needed to talk to you. We've been studying this for decades, and we've only identified one person who successfully interacted with the temporal field and survived with their timeline intact. You. When you triggered that lightning strike, you created a resonance with the field. You're partially entangled with it now. What does that mean? She hesitated. It means you might be able to navigate the temporal zones without getting trapped, and that makes you the only person who can reach the true source of the anomaly. I thought the stone was the source. The stone was a symptom. The real source is older, much older. She pulled up a geological map. What do you know about the Yellowstone hotspot? It's a supervolcano, one of the largest in the world. Correct. But it's more than that. The Yellowstone hotspot is a mantle plume, a channel of superheated rock rising from deep in the earth. It's been active for millions of years, and as the North American plate moves over it, it creates volcanic features in a chain stretching from Nevada to Wyoming. She traced a line on the map. 16 million years ago, the hotspot was under what's now northern Nevada. It's been moving northeast, creating calderas and volcanic features as it goes, and Setzer Creek sits directly on the path of that ancient movement. So, the stone was volcanic? Yes, but that's not the important part. The mantle plume doesn't just bring up heat and rock, it brings up something else. We don't have a name for it yet. The closest we can come is temporal magma, material from so deep in the earth that it exists partially outside of normal time. That sounds impossible. So did a fire that burns backward until you saw it. Sarah, the earth is older than you can imagine. 4.5 billion years. The material at its core has been there since the planet formed, untouched by surface processes, existing in conditions we can barely understand. And occasionally, that material reaches the surface. And when it does, it creates thin spots in time, places where the past and future can bleed through. Setzer Creek has been such a place for millions of years. The 1910 fire just made it visible. I tried to process this. You said I need to reach the true source. Where is it? Dr. Chen pulled up a three-dimensional map of the region. The temporal magma chamber is approximately 2,000 feet underground, directly beneath the old Setzer Creek burn. It's been slowly cooling and crystallizing for 16 million years, but the 1910 fire and the subsequent 79 years of the temporal loop heated it back up. Now it's active again, and it's spreading. 2,000 feet underground. How am I supposed to reach that? There's a cave system. It was formed by ancient lava tubes from when the hotspot was more active. One of the tubes runs from the surface down to the chamber. The entrance is about 5 miles from here. And what am I supposed to do when I get there? We don't know. But something has to be done to restabilize the temporal field before it spreads too far. You have a connection to the anomaly. Maybe you can communicate with it. Control it somehow. Communicate with temporal magma. You realize how insane this sounds. Yes, but you're going to do it anyway, aren't you? Because you've seen what happens when time breaks. You've met Edward Morrison and his crew trapped for 79 years. You've seen your own future self, caught in the loop. You know what's at stake. She was right. I couldn't walk away from this. When do we leave? I asked. Now. We have a team standing by. The cave entrance was hidden in a remote canyon, the opening partially collapsed and overgrown with vegetation. Dr. Chen's team had cleared it enough for access, but it still looked dangerous. The team consisted of 3 people besides Dr. Chen, 2 physicists and a geologist. They'd brought specialized equipment for measuring temporal fields and enough climbing gear to descend 2,000 feet. How long have you known about this cave? I asked, as we prepared to enter. We didn't until 3 days ago, Dr. Chen admitted. It appeared. One day there was solid rock, the next day there was a cave entrance. The temporal spreading is already changing the geology. That didn't make me feel better about this expedition. We entered the cave system. The temperature dropped immediately, and the air felt wrong, thick and heavy. My flashlight beam seemed to bend slightly, the light taking paths it shouldn't. The first chamber was natural, a lava tube about 20 feet in diameter, but as we went deeper, I started seeing things that didn't belong. Tools embedded in the rock walls, rusted and ancient. Markings that looked like writing, but in no alphabet I recognized. We're moving through time as well as space, one of the physicists, Dr. James Park, explained. The deeper we go, the more temporal layers we pass through. What you're seeing are artifacts from different eras, all existing simultaneously in this space. We descended for hours, using ropes and climbing equipment to navigate vertical sections. The cave branched and twisted, and more than once I had the disorienting sensation that we were climbing up while gravity insisted we were going down. And then I started seeing the firefighters. They were translucent, ghostly, but unmistakably real. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, wearing gear from different time periods. They were climbing through the cave just like we were, heading deeper, always deeper. "Don't make contact," Dr. Chen warned when I reached out toward one. They're temporal echoes, fragments of firefighters who've tried to reach the source over the years. If you touch them, you might get pulled into their timeline. How many people have tried this? We don't know. The cave exists across multiple timelines. Every attempt, successful or not, leaves an echo. I wondered if one of those ghosts was me. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the bottom. The lava tube opened into a massive chamber, and I had to catch my breath at what I saw. The floor of the chamber was covered in a pool of liquid that glowed with that familiar blue-purple light. Temporal magma, I realized. It wasn't hot in a thermal sense, but I could feel it radiating something. A pressure that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. And floating in the center of the pool, suspended somehow above the liquid, was a flame. It was the same blue flame I'd seen at Setzer Creek, but larger, more defined. It burned without fuel, without consuming anything, just existing in pure defiance of physics. The eternal flame, Dr. Chen breathed, the source of all of it. As I stared at the flame, I saw things moving in it, shapes, figures, entire scenes playing out. I saw the 1910 fire, saw Edward Morrison and his crew fighting desperately. I saw myself and my team parachuting in. I saw other fires from other times, all connected, all feeding into this central point. "It's not creating the temporal anomalies," I said, with sudden understanding. "It is a temporal anomaly. It's a fire burning across all time simultaneously." "How do we stop it?" Dr. Park asked. That was the question. You can't extinguish a flame that doesn't burn fuel. You can't cool something that doesn't generate heat in a conventional sense. I stepped closer to the edge of the pool. The temporal magma rippled at my approach, responding to my presence. "Sarah, don't!" Dr. Chen called. "We don't know what it will do." But I felt drawn forward. The flame was calling to me, recognizing me. I was part of it now, had been since I broke the stone at Setzer Creek. I knelt at the edge of the pool and reached out. The moment my hand touched the temporal magma, my perception exploded. I was everywhere and everywhen simultaneously. I saw the entire history of the Yellowstone hotspot. 16 million years of geological time compressed into a single moment. I saw the formation of the temporal magma, saw it rise through the Earth's crust, saw it create thin spots in time wherever it reached the surface. And I saw the fires. Thousands of fires across millions of years, all connected through the temporal field. Forest fires, grass fires, fires from lightning and volcanoes and human activity. Every fire that had ever burned in this region was part of the same eternal flame. I saw Edward Morrison not just from the 1910 loop, but his entire life. I saw him as a child, as a young man joining the Forest Service, as an old man he never got to become. All of his possible timelines existed here. I saw my own timeline spreading out like branches on a tree. In most of them, I got trapped in the loop, became that future self I'd seen at Setzer Creek. But in a few, a precious few, I escaped. And in one timeline, I did something different. Instead of trying to extinguish the eternal flame, I became its guardian. The vision released me, and I fell back from the pool, gasping. "Sarah!" Dr. Chen rushed over. "What did you see?" "Everything," I managed. "I saw everything." I stood up, my legs shaking. I understood now. The eternal flame couldn't be extinguished because it wasn't really fire. It was a focal point, a place where all possible timelines converged. Destroying it wouldn't solve anything. It would just scatter the temporal energy across all those timelines, creating chaos. But someone needed to maintain it. Keep it stable, prevent it from spreading uncontrollably, act as a bridge between the eternal flame and normal time. Someone who was already entangled with the temporal field. Someone like me. "I know what I have to do," I said. "What?" Dr. Chen asked, though I could see in her eyes that she already knew. "Someone has to stay here. Anchor the flame. Keep it from expanding. Be the new stone, essentially. Sarah, if you do that, you'll be trapped here, possibly forever. Or I'll exist across all timelines simultaneously like the flame. Either way, I won't be able to return to normal life. There has to be another way. There isn't. You know it. I know it. The temporal field needs a conscious anchor, someone who can navigate it, control it. That's why the stone worked for 79 years. It was a natural anchor. But now it's gone, and the field needs a new one." I looked at Dr. Park and the others. "Get out of here. Go back to the surface. Tell my crew what happened. Tell them I'm sorry." "Sarah," Dr. Chen started. "Go. The longer you stay, the harder it will be to leave. The cave is already starting to collapse other timelines. In an hour, you might not be able to find your way out." She wanted to argue. I could see it. But she also understood the reality of the situation. Sometimes sacrifice was the only option. They left, climbing back up through the lava tube, and I was alone with the eternal flame. I stepped into the pool of temporal magma. It didn't hurt. It felt like stepping into warm water, but the warmth was temporal rather than thermal. I could feel my timeline spreading out, connecting to all the other possible versions of my life. I walked toward the flame in the center. With each step, I could see more, understand more. The flame showed me its history, showed me all the people who'd tried to interact with it over the millennia. Most had been consumed, their timelines scattered. A few had succeeded in briefly controlling it. None had stayed. I would be the first. I reached the flame and extended my hand into it. The blue-purple light wrapped around me, and I felt my consciousness expanding to fill all of time. I was Sarah Martinez, Smokejumper, in 1989. I was Sarah Martinez, crew boss, in 1995. I was Sarah Martinez, retired firefighter, in 2023. I was Sarah Martinez, trapped in the temporal loop, in all the failed timelines. I was all of these people simultaneously, existing in all times, all places, all possibilities. And I was the guardian of the eternal flame. I understood now why it had been calling to me. It needed a consciousness to direct it, to prevent it from consuming everything. Fire isn't inherently destructive. It's a force of transformation, of renewal. But without guidance, it spreads without control. I became that guidance. I reached out through the temporal field and gently, carefully, pulled back the spreading anomaly. I couldn't eliminate it entirely. That would destroy the very fabric of time in this region. But I could contain it, keep it from expanding beyond the historical burn zone of the 1910 fire. I found Edward Morrison's timeline, him and all his crew scattered across the years. I gathered them and gave them peace, letting them experience their full lives, the ones they'd been denied when they got trapped in the loop. I found all the other firefighters who'd been caught over the years, hundreds of echoes and fragments, and I released them too. And I found my own timelines, all the versions of me who'd gotten trapped, who'd spent years or decades fighting the eternal fire. I gathered them back into myself, reclaiming all those lost possibilities. It took time, years, maybe centuries. It was hard to tell when you existed outside of linear time. But eventually, I stabilized the field. The eternal flame still burned, would always burn, but it was controlled now. Contained, safe, but there was a cost. I couldn't leave. If I stepped away from the flame, it would destabilize again, and all my work would be undone. I was bound here, a permanent guardian, existing across all time but unable to truly live in any of it. Sometimes I could send my consciousness out, experience moments in the surface world. I watched my crew from 1989 grow old, retire, tell stories about Sarah Martinez who disappeared on a solo hike in Idaho. I watched Dr. Chen continue her research, eventually proving that temporal physics was real, that time could be manipulated. I watched new fires burn across the years, and when they threatened to create new temporal anomalies, I was there, gently guiding them, preventing them from punching through to other times. I became a legend among smokejumpers. Stories of a ghostly figure who appeared in the worst fires, who guided lost crews to safety, who warned of dangerous conditions before they manifested. Some called me the Fire Angel. Others said I was just smoke and imagination. But I was real as anything that exists across all possible timelines can be. And sometimes, very rarely, I could manifest physically. A few seconds, maybe a minute, just long enough to help someone, to warn them, to make a difference. That's what I did when I saw my younger self at Setzer Creek in 1989. I manifested just long enough to mouth those 3 words, "Don't come back." But she didn't listen. She came back, descended into the cave and took her place as the guardian. Because that's what I did. What I had to do. What I would always do. The eternal flame burns in all times, and I burn with it. Guardian, prisoner, sacrifice, forever. Existing across all timelines simultaneously is not the same as existing in any of them. I learned that quickly. From my position in the eternal flame, I could see everything that happened in the Pacific Northwest fire region across 16 million years. I watched forests grow and burn and grow again. I watched glaciers advance and retreat. I watched humans arrive, first as hunter-gatherers, then as farmers, then as industrial civilization. And I watched fires. So many fires. Natural fires from lightning. Controlled burns by indigenous peoples managing the forest. Catastrophic fires like the 1910 blow-up. Modern wildfires driven by climate change and forest mismanagement. Every fire that burned in this region, I was part of it, guiding it, keeping it from creating new temporal anomalies. But I wasn't alone. About 5 years into my guardianship, relative to normal time, I felt another presence in the flame, someone else who'd become entangled with the temporal field, someone who'd made the same choice I had. At first, I thought it was one of my other timeline versions, echoes of myself from the various failed attempts. But this consciousness was different. Older, wiser, and somehow familiar. "Hello, Sarah," the presence said, and I recognized the voice. Edward Morrison. "Edward? But you were freed. I released you from the loop." "You did, in most timelines. But in one branch, I made a different choice. After 79 years of fighting the eternal fire, I understood what it needed. So instead of accepting freedom, I stayed, became a guardian, just like you." "How long have you been here?" "Relative to my perspective, about 130 years. I've been maintaining the flame since 1910, preventing it from spreading, learning its patterns." I felt overwhelming relief. I wasn't alone in this eternal vigil. Someone else understood, someone who'd been doing this far longer than I had. "Why didn't I sense you before?" "Because I didn't want you to. I needed to see if you'd commit to the guardianship, or if you'd try to escape once you understood the cost. A lot of people have touched the eternal flame over the millennia. Most tried to leave. Their timelines scattered, and they became the ghosts you saw in the cave. But I stayed. You stayed, which means you're truly suited for this. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome to the Long Watch." Over the following years, or decades, or centuries, Edward taught me how to navigate the temporal field. How to manifest in different eras, how to guide fires without being consumed by them, how to maintain the delicate balance between controlling the eternal flame and letting it burn naturally. He showed me other guardians, too. People from different eras who'd touched the flame and chosen to stay. A Shoshone medicine woman from the 15th century. A forest ranger from 2047. A firefighter from 2156 whose equipment and training I couldn't even comprehend. We were the Fire Watch, maintaining the eternal flame across all of time, preventing it from creating chaos. But something was changing. In 2023, relative to the normal timeline, I felt a disturbance in the temporal field. A new anomaly forming, different from anything I'd sensed before. I reached out with my consciousness and found the source. Setzer Creek. The site where the stone had been, where I'd triggered the lightning strike that shattered it. Someone was digging there. Not Dr. Chen's team this time. Someone else. Someone who didn't understand what they were disturbing. I manifested at the site, taking physical form for the first time in years. It was jarring, being solid again, feeling wind and temperature and the weight of my own body. I'd almost forgotten what it was like. The dig site was larger than before. A full archaeological excavation, with grid lines and equipment and students working under the supervision of a professor I didn't recognize. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the professor. "What are you doing here?" He looked up, surprised to see someone in the remote location. "Who are you? This is a restricted archaeological site." "I'm Sarah Martinez. I was one of the firefighters who worked this area in 1989. What are you excavating?" "We're studying an unusual geological formation that was reported here. Evidence suggests this site has been a focal point for human activity for thousands of years. We've found artifacts from multiple time periods, all in the same stratum, which shouldn't be possible. You need to stop digging." "Excuse me?" "This site is dangerous. There are geological instabilities. You could trigger a collapse." He looked at me skeptically. "I appreciate your concern, but we have all the necessary permits and safety clearances. We know what we're doing." I wanted to tell him the truth, that he was digging into a temporal wound, that every shovelful of earth risked destabilizing the eternal flame. But how could I explain that to someone who didn't believe in temporal physics? At least don't dig any deeper, I tried. Stay at the current level. We're planning to excavate down to the pre-Columbian layer. There's evidence of indigenous activity here that predates anything we've found in the region. Before I could argue further, one of the students called out, "Professor Harrison, you need to see this." They'd uncovered something, a stone chamber buried about 6 feet down, constructed from fitted basalt blocks. No, not again. I pushed forward, trying to see what they'd found. Inside the chamber was another piece of that blue-glowing basalt, smaller than the one from 1989, but identical in structure. "Incredible," Professor Harrison breathed. "This looks like it's been here for thousands of years, but the stone is still intact and is it glowing?" "Don't touch it," I said, urgently. "Please, you have to trust me. That stone is dangerous." But one of the students was already reaching for it, eager to examine this impossible artifact. Time seemed to slow as I watched her hand approach the stone. I knew what would happen. The moment she touched it, her timeline would entangle with the temporal field. She'd become another guardian or another ghost, or something worse. I couldn't let that happen. I manifested fully, pulling more of my consciousness into the physical world than I'd ever done before. I became solid, real, present, and I grabbed the student's hand just before she touched the stone. The contact created a circuit. Me, the student, the stone, all connected through the temporal field. I felt her timeline spreading out, saw all her possible futures. In most of them, she touched the stone and became trapped. But in one, I pulled her back just in time. I chose that timeline, forced it into being through sheer will, using my connection to the eternal flame to make it real. The student stumbled back, looking confused. "What happened?" I felt. "Did you pull me?" "Yes. You were about to make a terrible mistake." Professor Harrison was staring at me now, really seeing me for the first time. "You're not just a former firefighter, are you? There's something wrong with you. You look wrong." He was perceptive. When I manifested fully, I didn't look entirely human. I was too much smoke and light, not enough flesh and blood. "Cover that chamber," I told him. "Fill it back in, and don't come back here. Tell whoever authorized this dig that the site is unstable, contaminated, whatever you need to say, but stop digging. I'm not taking orders from some—" The ground shook. Not an earthquake, but a temporal pulse from the eternal flame, responding to the disturbance of the second stone. I felt it then. The terrible truth I'd been avoiding. There wasn't just one stone, there were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered across the 16-million-year path of the Yellowstone hotspot. Each one a fragment of temporal magma that had crystallized near the surface. Each one a potential anchor point for temporal anomalies. The 1989 stone at Setzer Creek was just the first. By destroying it, I hadn't ended the threat. I'd just shifted it to the other stones, which were now activating in sequence. And if they all activated, if temporal anomalies spread across the entire hotspot track, the resulting chaos would make the 1910 loop look trivial. I pulled back from the physical world, returning to the eternal flame. Edward was waiting for me. "You felt it too?" I asked, the awakening of the other stones. "Yes, it's starting, Sarah. The convergence." "The what?" Every 16 million years, the Yellowstone hotspot creates a supervolcanic eruption, a catastrophic event that reshapes the entire region. We're approaching the next one. And when it happens, all the temporal stones will activate simultaneously. When? Based on the geological cycles, about 50 years from now. 2073 relative to normal time. 50 years. That seemed like a long time, but from the perspective of the eternal flame, it was an eye blink. What happens during the convergence? All timelines collapse into one. Past, present, and future become simultaneous. For most of the world, it will just be a moment of confusion, a brief flicker of impossibility. But for the hotspot region, for the 3 million acres that burned in 1910, time will stop being linear. How do we prevent it? We don't. The convergence is natural, inevitable, part of the Earth's deep time cycles, but we can guide it, shape it, make sure it doesn't destroy everything. How? By gathering all the guardians, everyone who's ever touched the eternal flame and survived. We bring them together at the moment of convergence and use our combined consciousness to stabilize the timeline collapse. Keep it controlled, localized, safe. How many guardians are there? Across all of time? 17 that we know of, 18 counting you. I thought about that. 18 people scattered across thousands of years, all maintaining the same vigil, all working toward the same goal of keeping time stable. We need to start preparing, Edward said. Reaching out to the other guardians, teaching them what's coming, coordinating our efforts. We have 50 years of normal time, but from our perspective, we need to act now. So we did. Edward and I reached across the timelines, finding the other guardians one by one. The Shoshone medicine woman whose name translated roughly as walks between days. A Roman soldier who'd been stationed in Britain and somehow ended up in the American wilderness 1,000 years before Europeans arrived. A firefighter from 2089 who'd come back in time specifically to join the Fire Watch. Each of them had their own story, their own reason for becoming a guardian. But we all shared the same commitment. Maintaining the eternal flame, preventing temporal chaos, protecting the timeline. As 2073 approached, I could feel the tension building in the temporal field. The stones were resonating with each other, creating harmonic patterns that rippled across time. Small anomalies started appearing across the Pacific Northwest, people experiencing déjà vu. Time loops lasting seconds or minutes. Ghosts appearing from the past and future. Dr. Chen's team detected it, of course. They'd been monitoring the region for decades, and they knew something big was coming, but they couldn't stop it. No one could. On August 20th, 2073, the convergence began. All the temporal stones activated simultaneously. The eternal flame expanded, spreading across the entire hotspot track in an instant, and time itself began to collapse. I was there, existing in all moments at once. I saw the supervolcano erupt 2 million years ago. I saw the forest fire of 1910. I saw my own parachute jump in 1989. I saw future fires burning in forests that didn't exist yet. All of it happening simultaneously, all timelines converging on a single point, and I felt the other guardians joining me. 18 consciousnesses spanning thousands of years, all focused on one goal. We wove the timelines together like threads in a tapestry. We couldn't prevent the convergence, but we could shape it, guide it, make it beautiful instead of destructive. We created what I can only describe as a temporal garden, a space where all possible times existed in harmony, where you could walk from 1910 to 2073 to 10,000 years in the future just by taking a few steps, where the forest was simultaneously young and old, burned and green, growing and returning to Earth. For the people living in the region, it was a day of wonder. They saw time become visible, saw their ancestors and descendants, saw all the possible versions of themselves. And then, as the convergence stabilized, it settled into a new equilibrium. Time became linear again, but with a difference. The hotspot region was now a place where the past could speak to the present, where the future could warn about dangers, where time itself was just a little more flexible than elsewhere. And the guardians, all 18 of us, remained, maintaining the eternal flame, watching over the temporal garden, making sure the convergence stayed stable. I exist there still. Sometimes I manifest in the physical world, appearing to firefighters in danger, warning them of flashovers before they happen, guiding lost hikers to safety. I'm the smoke that moves against the wind, the ember that never goes out, the warmth in the coldest night. I am Sarah Martinez, smokejumper, guardian, eternal. I am the fire that burns backwards and forwards and in all directions at once, and I am home. In 2089, a young woman named Maria Chen, great-granddaughter of Dr. Patricia Chen, joins the smokejumper service. She's brilliant, dedicated, and has a natural connection to fire that her colleagues can't explain. On her first real fire, deep in the Idaho wilderness, she gets separated from her crew. Lost in the smoke, running out of air, she knows she's about to die. That's when I appear to her, a figure made of smoke and light, wearing a smokejumper uniform from decades past. "This way," I tell her. "Follow me." I guide her out of the fire, to safety, to her crew. As she emerges from the smoke, she looks back to thank me. "Who are you?" she asks. I smile, and in that smile, she sees all the guardians who came before, all the people who chose to stay and protect others. "I'm Sarah Martinez," I say, "and I've been waiting for you, because Maria Chen is destined to become the 19th guardian. I've seen her timeline, seen the choice she'll make in 20 years when she touches the eternal flame and decides to stay, but that's a story for another time. For now, I return to the flame, to my eternal vigil, to the long watch that began in 1910 and will continue until the earth itself grows cold. The fire burns backwards. The fire burns forwards. The fire burns in all directions at once, and I burn with it, forever."